You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This is a deep dive episode with my last interview that I did with Gary Zukav. Gary and I said we would do 4 episodes together, and I'm doing a deep dive after each one. And we'd gotten along so well and enjoyed our work together and actually become friends that we're probably going to do a lot more for you guys. But for right now, this is the end of this particular series. So in this episode, I want to recap some of the things that we talked about that, in my opinion, are the most salient points in the episode. So enjoy and keep listening. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so let's deep dive into the episode. And the last couple of deep dives went a lot longer than I expected. Honestly, I wanted to keep them at about 30 minutes, and I know they ended up being 45 minutes to an hour. I know that's a long time, and it's a long time for me also because it's 11:30 at night, and I've had a long day, a long week. So I want to see if I can keep this one a little shorter, but I want to cover, in my opinion, what I believe are the most salient points in the conversation with Gary. In the pre-talk, meaning he and I visiting prior to the air quote interview, he mentioned a lot. We were talking about our health, and I just got over COVID for the 3rd time. And I said, and I've learned in my observation, my thoughts, I said, all that really matters is that we're healthy. And I do believe that. And Gary added to that, and I agree with what he added. And he said, yes, that definitely matters. But what also matters, and I was only talking about the context of health, but he said, what matters is how much we share. I strongly agree with that. And that you've heard now in probably 2 or 3 different episodes, I'm not sure how long you've been listening, you've heard me talking about the concept of Aini. Aini is ancient Incan for reciprocity of life. Everything in life. I even mentioned it on an episode, I don't know if it was on Aini or something else, but I talked about the Beatles song, You Get What You Give. And that's the last line in one of their, most famous songs. You get what you give. The reason that you guys aren't getting what you want in life is because you're not giving something to get. And we don't want to consciously say, oh, if I give something, then I'll get something. I don't live that way. Where I live is with an open heart and service. Where I live from is let me see how much better of a place that I can make the world. Let me see what impact I can make. Let me see who and how I can serve to help people live better lives. And when they do that, we all benefit. So I just wanted to, that's not in the episode, I think, he and I talking about that. But so many of us, we confuse open-heartedness and kindness with sharing. Because many times we are actually very, very selfish, and we might have an open and loving heart and we like to share. But what we don't recognize is that we also are very selfish with our sharing. What I mean by that is one of my really good friends, he has an amazingly open heart and he's a really good guy and he helps a lot of people. However, what I noticed in him, and I'm a lot older than he is, and I see I see his behavior in me when I was his age, and he's 20 years younger than I am. And when I was his age, I'm like, yep, I could see that in me. And even though I didn't recognize it back then, and that he loves to help people and he loves to give. But his paradigm is I will help people and I will give after I do something, take care of, meaning do something or take care of myself first. And he doesn't recognize it, but he's being selfish. And I don't mean self-care like feeding yourself and I'll feed people after I've eaten and et cetera. And I'm always about sharing things. But let me give you an example so you leave with the correct example. So when he needed help with things, he needed some significant help in his life at one point 3 or 4 years ago, and he needed significant help. And my phone rang a whole lot, him calling me, asking me for help, for guidance, for input, for sharing, whatever it might have been at that point. I always was there for him no matter what. I dropped everything. And when he needed me, I was there for him. Now, again, I'm a lot more mature and 20 years older than he is, and I've learned these things over time. But this past year, when I needed help on something, I did ask him for help. And I really don't ask a lot of people for help. And I'm like, can you help me with this? And what I found was that he wasn't available. And it wasn't because he couldn't be available. It's because he chose not to be available because he chose to do other things that would bring him joy. Now, let me explain that again so I don't leave you with any false conceptions or perceptions because some of this may relate to you. So what I mean by that, I'm just making this up as an example, okay? So let's say that I ask for help on something and he's like, I can't do it today or I can't do it tomorrow. But then as a metaphor only, as an example, I would see pictures or videos of him out running around in a dune buggy. And again, as an example, okay, this is not the real example, but it's giving you an example. So when I needed help with something and I really needed help, you weren't there and you said you were too busy and you couldn't get to it. I understand that. But yet that very same day, you also do a post about how you're out enjoying your brand new dune buggy. Now, again, that's an example, but that's what I mean by that. This person, when they didn't have air quote anything else other to do, or when helping me would not interfere with their life, their pleasure, their joy, and whatever they wanted to do someday, and it didn't interfere in some way, they were available. And that's what I mean by saying they are or were being selfish. They have a big heart, but they are also selfish in that they will help me or anyone else after they're done doing things that they think they want to do when the person might need help, but yet they'd rather go have fun. Again, only as an example, but food for thought for you guys. So Gary talks a lot, and it's one of his favorite topics, and it's what his last book is about awakening. But he likes to talk, and so do I, a lot about changes on the planet. And his vernacular, his phraseology is that we're evolving into multisensory beings. My vernacular and my language, because we're talking about the same thing, is that we are evolving into 5D instead of 3D consciousness. Now, I don't know how long you've listened, and if you're brand new, go all the way back to the beginning because every episode has something that will improve your life in some way. Many times people think that the older content is of no value because it's older content, and that is just not true. But you've heard me talk a lot about 3D and 5D. Now, when Gary says we are evolving into multisensory beings, and I say we're evolving into 5D beings, what do you hear? And how do you hear that? The way that most people hear it is, okay, let me keep marching to the beat of my own drum. Now, Joe, all that stuff you're talking about, I like it. It's interesting. It sounds really, really fascinating. I'm a spiritualist, so human consciousness is changing. Okay, that sounds really good. I like that, and I want human consciousness to change and evolve. Why? Because I'm a spiritualist, and that's what I want. Yet, on the flip side, what a lot of people do is they hear it and they change nothing in themselves. They still are angry at the world, angry at their mother-in-law and their father-in-law and their mom and their dad, and they're resentful and they're shameful, when in truth, we can't hang on to those lower frequencies and evolve into the higher consciousness that's happening on the planet. When you look around, even science proves it. It doesn't take a scientist to demonstrate that things are changing on the planet. And Gary likes to talk about that, and we talked about it in this episode about power structures crumbling, governments, economies, social structures. The social fabric in a lot of different places is unraveling. And Don Javier has told me for many years this was coming. And Gary's also used the phraseology that we're in it. We are in it right now. And you can't afford to hang on to your old ways. In particular, you cannot afford to hang on to your negativity and your lowest frequency vibration, feelings, and emotions. You can't simultaneously evolve and grow and be angry and hateful and shameful at the same time. And I think what some people think is, oh, okay, the world is evolving and growing, and that's all cool because I'm going to grow and evolve too, but I'm going to hang on to my shit and my anger and my resentment and all these kind of things and shame. I'm going to hang on to these things. But you know what? I get to go along for the ride anyway because consciousness is changing. As I understand, it doesn't work that way. That if we don't evolve our consciousness and we don't willingly open our hearts to grow and evolve and serve and contribute, it's going to affect us physically. It's going to affect our physical beingness on this planet. Why? Because we're staying at a lower frequency. We're staying at a lower frequency when the train, so to speak, is moving at a higher frequency. I slowed down there because the example that popped into my mind, I just had a flashback to when I lived in New York City. So let's say that your arm gets stuck in the door, and I never saw it happen. I saw the door close on people, but let's say your hand gets stuck in the door and that train takes off. You better move at the speed of that train or whammo, you're going to get hit by the wall as the train goes in a tunnel. So what I'm sharing with you, as consciousness evolves and speeds up on the planet, and even the planet is speeding up. Look up the Schulman resonance. The planet is speeding up. Consciousness is changing. You can't move at a slower pace, meaning you want to hang on to your negativity and your fear and your anger and your shame. You can't simultaneously hang on to that and expect to evolve and grow with the evolving consciousness on the planet. You can't expect to grow into the multi-sensory functioning beings that Gary's talking about and the way he's talking about it until you choose to let go of your 3D human crap. He calls it your personality stuff, matters of the ego and the human personality, whatever you want to call it. You can't hang on to those things and simultaneously grow and evolve spiritually. And it's vital that we grow and evolve spiritually. I want to jump around at some random points here, things we talked about. He had also mentioned every compulsion, every obsession, every addiction. These are things we experience as fear. I mentioned it before, and it's worth a thought. Don Javier's talked about it for a lot of years with those of us that work with him. And it took me a long time to get my mind around this. But he said to all of us, and he said it many times, that we only have two emotions as beings and a body, as 3D beings. And those emotions are love and fear. And every other emotion comes from those two emotions. So what I'm looking at is, what are we experiencing in our life? Are we experiencing a lot of fear, or are we experiencing a lot of love? Now, let me dig a little deeper in that. The word experiencing. And I ask a lot of times and different times, what experience of life do you want? That's a big question. What experience of life do you want? All of us want, many times it's 3D based. We want a good experience of life. We want good health. We want a big home. We want cars. We want the illusion that doesn't exist, air quotes, security. We want these things. But yet, what we persist in doing is no, I'm going to hang on to my lower frequency emotions, but yet I want the higher frequency things in life. So I'm going to live in the fear, but I want the love, so to speak. Remember, only two emotions, fear and love. I'm going to live in all the things, all the addictions, all the compulsions, all the obsessions, all the anger, all of the things we experience as fear, but yet I want a better experience of life. It's not going to happen that way. So, the comment that he was making in our time together is with the five sensory personality, as he calls it, I call it the ego and the 3D. What are you experiencing? Because what you're experiencing is what you identify with. So, to give you an example, I think, I looked at the news yesterday, and if I'm going to look at the news, which is very seldom, I will look at Fox, I will look at CNN to get two completely different stories. Many times, either network won't even mention stories on the other, even though they're significant. I found it kind of humorous when the U.S. Capitol was being attacked, and it wasn't even being mentioned on Fox News, but it was on CNN and Reuters and AP. Now, what I'm sharing with you is I can't experience what's not in me. So people looking at all this chaos in the world, which I'll talk about in just a moment, if you're in a lot of fear, that's what you're identifying with. That's how you identify at the identity level as a being. I am a being who, I'm going to use this for lack of better words, I subscribe to fear. That is my reality. I identify with fear. And because I identify with fear, when I look out on the world, that's what I see, the external world creating more of the fear in my internal world. I'll talk more about that in a bit. When I, Jim, my 3D, when I look at the world and the chaos, all the protests right now in the US about the occupation of Gaza and etc. When I look at that, I don't enjoy seeing human pain and human suffering. But when I look at it, I also know that nothing new can grow until something old dies, meaning the old stuff has to die for the new stuff to be born, for the new stuff to sprout, for the new stuff to come. So when I see the chaos in the world and the things that are happening, it does not incite and it does not instill fear in me. It actually, and I'm going to say this in a bit of a morbid way, but again, my caveat is I don't want to see any person in pain, but I also don't know their karma and their dharma. I don't know what their experience is, and maybe their experience is to experience pain. By the way, somebody listening to the podcast, you guys know me pretty well by now that have listened for any amount of time. If you don't like something I say, then it's really simple. Don't listen. It's not that hard. But somebody was beating me up on YouTube when I talked about seeing a guy flip out of a wheelchair when I was in Mexico. And my nanosecond thought was, when he was crawling in the streets, was, what is his karma? Now, this person literally chastised me, basically saying, that's the first thing you thought of instead of helping the guy. I never said I didn't help the guy. I just said that's what my first thought was. So that person making that comment was judging me and criticizing me with a lack of information. And all I can tell you right now, I might have a lack of information. I'm just conveying to you what they wrote and how I'm conveying it to you. Where was I going here? Okay. So, the compassion and the fear in the world, and that the things that are happening in the world are necessary for the evolution of these species, meaning the old things have to die. And we see that happening. We see the social structures coming apart. Now, I don't know what you think or not think, but you're literally right now in the process of watching the United States collapse. And what's the big deal? I kind of feel like Thomas Paine in that I'm not a nationalist. I'm a spiritual being, a human being on the planet having a dual human spiritual experience. And I'm a citizen of the earth. Everyone on this planet is my brother and sister, not just people waving the American flag or the Chinese flag or the Russian flag or all the shit that people get into. Okay, I want to segue from the episode for just one moment. And I want to ask you, where were you most stuck in 2023? What things held you back the most? When I ask people, why they're not getting what they want in life, people often say, well, I was stuck with XYZ. Or, and this may resonate with you, I feel stuck. If you're feeling stuck, one question I want you to ask yourself is, what is it costing me? What is it costing me to not resolve this and to battle being stuck? And when you add that up, whether it's money and especially in business, but in your health and your relationships, when you add that up, it's extremely costly to be stuck in life. Now, all this being said, I created a new challenge. I created it last year. Many thousands of people have gone through it, and it's called the Get Unstuck Challenge. Interesting. The name's all about getting unstuck. Now, in this challenge, it's a 9-day challenge, and I walk you through at a very profound, at a very spiritual, level, and even at a cosmic level. I walk you through who and how you're being as a being, meaning your presence on the planet. And when you understand that, when you understand the nature of you at a very deep level, now you might have heard me say be to have before, and that's more about 3D reality. Who do you have to be so you can do so you can have? But I'm talking, what does it mean to be? And then what is that power associated with that? When you understand that, you automatically get unstuck in life. This program never offered it before to you guys. We're offering it now. I don't think we've offered it to the podcast and an ad. Maybe we have, maybe we have. I don't remember. Anyway, doesn't matter because we haven't offered it a lot if we have. But we're offering the Get Unstuck Challenge again. It's only $97. Thousands of people have been through it and they rave about the results they're getting. And I know that you will do the same thing. So again, ponder the question, what does it cost me? What am I giving up? What peace of mind? What happiness? What money? What relationships am I giving up in life because I am stuck in my own crap? Now, as you're thinking about that, click the link, go to tcp.jimfortin.com/unstuck. Again, and we'll drop the link in the show notes, tcp.jimfortin.com/unstuck. Download the program, you get started right away, and your life will start changing dramatically. When you apply what you're learning in that program, your life will start changing in very dramatic ways, very, very quickly. And as a matter of fact, in the next 9 days. Okay, back to the episode. So, when people look at the crumbling on the planet, the economies, the United States, and the de-dollarization and the BRICS bloc, meaning the economic bloc with Russia, China, Iran, Brazil, and India, and United Arab Emirates, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't matter. It's just 3D, as Gary would say, human sense, human personality things. That's all that it is. So I'm not going where I'm going here. I'm not going to let those things excite and engage fear in me because I don't have the fear in me. That's food to think about. Because if you're experiencing any fear, that means it's in you. And we need to grow and evolve beyond that. And where I go, and I had the good fortune to have a stroke and heart failure in 2020, where I go is, hey, I'm along for the ride. I look at life like a roller coaster, and guess what? It's going to go up and it's going to go down. And sometimes it's going to go faster and it's going to go slower. But hey, I'm strapped in and I'm going to go for the entire ride. And then when the ride's over, I'm going to get I'm going to get off the ride. I'm going to go home, but I'm on for the ride. So what I'm sharing with you is you have to let go of your 3D. I call it the ego. Gary calls it the personality. Now, the way that I do that and have done that, and this can be a great deal of focus for those of you that choose to follow this. But the phrase that I want to share with you, the concept I want to share with you, because you are this, even though some people might think it's sacrilege, and then they'll go to a Catholic church, which is actually sacrilege, but know yourself as God. I've used these examples before that you take a drop of water out of the ocean, a cup of water. That cup of water, what's in that cup of water is the same consistency and the same chemical compound of what's in the ocean. It's the same thing. So you are that cup, this vessel that you walk the planet in. You are this cup. But you know what? This cup is a reflection of the totality of the universe, which is, for a lack of better words, God. Many of us rebel when we hear that word God. I did for many years, and I've also grown and found it to be one of the most extraordinary words and divine words in a non-religious way. Many of us rebel with this word God because we see it as 3D, meaning Christianity or baptism or Mormonism, or we see it in something that actually I perceive as divisive to humanity. So therefore, we reject the word God because of the dogma that it has attached to it. But I'm saying, look at it for the divine beauty of the word. And the word God is all encompassing. It's the universe. It's everything. And we are that thing. And when we can get our mind around that, and it's not about thinking, it's about knowing. When we can get our mind around that, that's when things start to change for us. Okay, so Gary made a comment here. Maybe I've already covered it. He goes, that's the change that we're in. That's the change in Earth School. We learn to identify with those parts of oneself that are attached to Earth. So, to the point that I was making, so if you're getting into fear about Putin or Gaza or the US election or your pocketbook or this or that or this or that, these are all lessons that you learned in the Earth School. And then the question is, what are you attached to? And that's a big one. And actually, I was just writing some stuff on it a little earlier about attachment. We attach to things because of a lack of awareness, meaning whatever we attach to controls us, but we don't even have the awareness to know that we're giving our power away to these things that control us, and they whip us around like a dog wags its tail. And that's what happens, is that we get air quote wagged around because we're attaching to something. We attach to people, we attach to places, we attach to money, we attach to ideas. And many of us are so attached to our idea of our 3D self, which is not even real, it's an illusion. We attach to our idea of ourself. We won't even look at ourselves because we're afraid of what we're going to see if we look at ourselves. And we don't want to say, oh, I don't want to look at that. That's ugly. I don't like that. When the reality is, power comes when we can look at the things that we don't want to see, and we can do it with courage. Now we're letting go of what Gary calls the human personality, and I call the 3D ego. We must let go because you're none of those things anyway. You are a soul in the body. You are a soul first and a body second. Most of us have it backwards. Most of humanity has it backwards. So your takeaway for this part is look at the world. It's crumbling. Socioeconomics, governments, social structures, nationalities, relationships. It's struggling. And the question is, how are you experiencing this? Because any fear that you have here is all related to your 3D ego, or as Gary would call your human personality. Now, I've worked with a shaman now for 27 years. So I have the good fortune of having 27 years or 28 years now to air quote work on this. I know that it can be a lot more challenging than as easy as I'm making it sound, because I don't know that it was easy. I know that I've been on this path for a lot of years, and each and every year I just let go of more things. Why? It's just more junk to carry on your back if you want to carry it. So when we see the external world or the exterior world coming apart, any fear, Gary's comment was, any fear that we're experiencing by seeing the external world, we are experiencing in our internal dynamics, his word, and the internal dynamics are what's in you. So what we experience is the external dynamics with the intellect, meaning the intellect, in his words, he says intellect, I say the rational mind, the rational 3D mind. So we experience what's happening with the intellect or the rational 3D mind. But guess what? That's all five sensory. That's what he calls it. To me, it's 3D. So when we're in fear, we're experiencing the fear from the fear we've learned from a lifetime of being on this planet when everything, the whole universe is inside of you. And the universe inside of you, as a matter of fact, Gary's comment is, Gary said, consider that the universe is not outside of you. It's on the inside of you. It is in you. The power of the universe is in you. But we give all that power away. It's kind of like just unwrapping a banana or, peeling a banana. That's how easily we do it. We have all this power. We peel the banana and just throw the peel away like you're walking outside and you just throw it to the side on the road. That's what we do. We have this power inside of us, this God power inside of us. And what do? We throw it away by going back to the five sensory personality, as Gary calls it, or the ego that I call it. And let me see what he said here. A couple of more comments here is most people don't recognize how powerful they are. And I said, I'm prefacing a statement here. When I said most people don't recognize how powerful they are, because I said it's because it's just habitual doing this podcast and doing my transformational coaching programs, is that if you're not creating what you want in life, then you are miscreating. And I think I heard that obviously, maybe from Don Javier, not obviously, but I heard it from Abraham Hicks maybe 25 years ago, the word miscreating. And Abraham Hicks once said, anytime you're in fear, you're miscreating. And Gary gave an opposing point to that, because I believe he had told me that he's friends with Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, whatever his name was. Esther Hicks is one of them, but I think Gary, something Hicks, the gentleman, I don't know. But Gary said, and I agree 100%, we're not miscreating. It's that we're always creating, and we're creating from fear. So I think we're saying the same thing, but we're using different language. And when you create with love, is what Gary wanted to say. And I've always watched Don Javier do this for 28 years. I've never seen him mad. I've never seen him angry. I've never seen him criticize anyone. I've never seen him complain. I've never seen him condemn anyone for anything. And I've always seen him be just almost like a parent, just coddling and rocking a baby. When you're with him, that's how you feel. You feel coddled and warm and loved and supported. And back to Gary's comment, when you create with love, you are creating with the full power of your soul. But also, when you're creating in fear, you are creating with the full power of your soul. Think about that. So be very careful with where you're holding your thoughts and what you're wanting to create. Because in that moment, that is your intention. And Gary talks about that. And that's also in his book, The Seed of the Soul. Don Javier's talked to me about intention now for decades. Don Javier once told me, And by the way, I have my own thoughts and my own thinking, but I'm sharing when I mention the word Don Javier, I'm just giving proper credit where it's due because he was the one who told me this. And that's why I'm saying he's the one who told me, or Gary or whoever. It's not that I can't think for myself or I'm wanting them to think for me. It's that I'm giving proper credit to the energy of where this came from. But Don Javier and I were talking a long time ago when he said to me, the most abundant force, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, the most abundant force in the universe is your intention. And your intention is always creating. Now, Gary's point of view is that whatever you do, you're doing with intent. Gary's point of view is this. And I talk about this a lot, especially, and a lot of you are registered for this, and I've gotten extremely positive reviews. Several thousand people have been through that program in the last couple of years, but my Get Unstuck program, we offer it to you here often every couple of weeks with commercials and, getting registered for the Get Unstuck challenge. It's a 9-day challenge, but it's all about the deeper levels of be to have. You have to be before you can do, before you can have. Most of us don't know how to be. We don't recognize that we are human beings. And we don't know how to be because we're all doers. And that's what we become, is we become doers. However, Gary's point was, and I agree with that, however you're being, that's what your intention is in that moment. So you think about that. And then your intention is what creates and manifests for you. So let me give you an example here and we'll wrap up on this. So let's say that you are being angry today and you're throwing tantrums and you're spewing your anger all over people and you're slamming doors. How are you being? Because how you're being is what you are attracting back to you. The same thing, the reverse of that. If you're being loving and kind and open-hearted, but especially just unconditionally loving, and I'm going to tell you from my experience, I'm still working on that. And it's a process for all of us, however we choose to embark on that journey. But what I'm sharing is you're going to create a better experience of life, and the experience of life that you really desire, you really want, when you open your heart, no matter how much you do not want to. We have to let the old go. We have to let the habits of the personality and the brain go. We have to let the soul come through. And again, I'm going to go back here and recapitulate. The number one line, it's a single line, 4 words. And I've had this in front of me for years now. Know myself as soul. So I ask you listening, what does that mean to you when I say that and you explore that? Know myself as soul. What does it mean to know yourself as soul? And I've said it in various ways at different times here on the podcast. Do you think your soul gets into anger and shame and guilt and envy and all these kind of lower function human emotions? No, it doesn't. And when you're getting into those things, you don't know yourself as soul. I'm not judging. I've got my own lessons. I'm on the planet just like you are, learning my lessons, and I'll learn them in my own time, just like you will. We're not racing anywhere in that we're all on our own journey and we're all traveling at our own speed. And we're all going to get to the end result where we need to be energetically at our own time, whether it's this lifetime or another lifetime. Okay, I want to wrap up this episode there. I'll keep it a little shorter because I can go a lot longer. And I want to say thank you for all the very positive feedback I've gotten from these 9 episodes with Gary. We did an episode back in December, I believe, and now we've just done 4 with him and then me recapitulating those 8 episodes. And I've gotten a great deal of very positive reinforcement and you guys enjoying these episodes. Gary's asked me about doing some other things together. And he and I are both exploring that, but it's not up to me. I have an open heart about it. I have an open mind about it. I will say yes to anything and everything and let the universe take us to where it needs to unfold. So I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening to these episodes. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to serve you guys. It's a blessing to serve. And of course, I will continue I'm going to keep on going, and I'll have a new episode for you next week, not on the Gary Zukav stuff, but on something new starting next week. So thank you for listening, and I will catch you over on another episode. And by the way, your transformational takeaway, can't forget that. Your transformational takeaway is start exploring the concept of knowing yourself as soul. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you later. Bye bye.